Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I am your host, Blake Rasmussen, and I am flying without a net this week. Producer Sean is off, so I'm running the back end all on my own here with these two hands. We're gonna end this whole setup. We're gonna see how that goes, but we definitely wanted to make sure to bring you this show because we are celebrating the 5th anniversary of Magic the Gathering Arena, which kind of blows my mind. You two, I've been at Wizards for 9 years, and I could swear this was 2 years ago that we launched this thing, but it's been 5 years. It's older than my kid. Um, so we are going to talk about a ton of stuff about Arena today. We're going to cover the content of 2 articles that we put out over the last 2 days. We're going to answer a ton of your questions. We're probably going to spend most of the show on Q&A. So this is where I introduce the people who are going to be asking those questions. They're on this side. Yeah. Chris Kiritz and Ian Adams, which if you've listened to any Arena content before or have watched our show or watched Gen Con either at home or in person, you're very familiar with these two fine gentlemen. So they are going to answer all of your questions. And we're just going to talk about Arena for the next hour. And yeah, we'll get into it. Before we do, I do want to highlight that this morning we announced one thing. We announced the Festival in a Box for Magic Con Las Vegas. It's got a lot of cool stuff in it, including some promos. If you head to magic.gg, you will be able to see all the stuff in that festival in a box. Normally I'd have a graphic, but producer Sean was like, let's keep things easy for Blake today because this is not a thing he's good at. But we are good at talking about Magic, talking about Arena. So we're going to kick things off, everyone, just by kind of checking in. It's 5 years. 5 years is a good chunk of time. How are things going down in Arena World, Garrett?
Going pretty well. I think we've had a really good year. We've done a lot of stuff. Wilds of Eldraine just released, and that went relatively well. From a player perspective, the launch, we always have a little trepidation on every time we do a major release. Something's going to happen. It always does. But again, from a player impact side, we were pretty smooth this time around. And we're really looking forward to wrapping up the year. It's been a great 5 years. I mean, this is I have an article that just went live this morning.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is like, we're, kind of how I close that is, we are certainly closer to the beginning of this path than the end of it. We expect to be around for a very long time. So, this coming from, if you don't know me at all, I worked on Miko for 15 years, so I'm kind of familiar with the long haul of things. So, so I expect Arena to do the same.
Yeah. Ian, thoughts?
Yeah, it's been exciting. I'm started later than Chris. I've been here 4 years, so my start date
That's
and
an
Arena's
understatement.
leaving beta. So I start right with Arena leaving beta. Like I think I started literally the same week Arena left beta, and it's been exciting to see everything that's happened since then. It can be easy to forget that, even 4 years ago, there was no chat. There was no. We'd just gotten Brawl right when I started. There was no draft against human beings. It was only bot draft at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of changes and improvements have been really exciting. And knowing what else we have coming is pretty thrilling.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of that a little bit later. But first, so the actual celebration for the 5th anniversary kicks off next week.
Yep.
So what chat's already kind of been asking, like, what do we have in store? So tell us what's coming next week to help celebrate that 5th anniversary.
So starting on what is it, the 19th, Tuesday? Every day starting that day, when you log in, we'll have a little surprise for you waiting in your mailbox. And we'll continue to do that throughout the week. The team has, a bunch of fun little stuff planned. So we'll be doing that. The with being so close to WoW, we don't have any huge major events, but we're supporting. Hey, let's do some. We're talking with Joey on the community team about doing some fun video content, talking with people on the team, like where were you 5 years ago? What are you doing now on Arena? That kind of stuff. I think that'll be super fun. So we're looking at some of those things, and again, just kind of celebrating the 5 years of, like, as Ian was saying, we've come from launching with standard as the main format, and very limited play options, to where we're at now, where we're have half a dozen constructed formats, weekly play options, and all of the other things that go along with that. So that'll just be part of reinforcing that, and again, sharing more with a little bit more behind the scenes as we go, and sharing some of the team that works to bring Arena to players.
Yeah. And I do want to talk more about the formats and the expansion in that space, since we put out an article yesterday about that. But there was a question I wanted to touch on that's pertinent. So you mentioned the rewards in your mailbox. The question is, do you have to log in each day to get them, whatever that special surprise is? Or if you miss a day, will they still be there?
If you miss a day, you'll be fine.
Okay.
One of the, I think we've talked about this before. Like, again, we try to make it so, hey, when people have lives or whatever, that they can engage with Arena on their schedule. It's part of the promise of fast fun magic where you're at. So yeah, if you're busy because of life and can't make it, great. Just whenever you log in, the little gifts will be waiting for you.
Great.
It's one of the nice things about Mailbox.
Yes,
we're very happy to add that feature.
So we'll talk about the added features in a sec, because that was today's article, and I think some people are still digesting that. But looking back at yesterday's article, one of the things you mentioned was the formats and how you all think about those, and that those formats have grown. Where are you all at in thinking about formats? Are you looking at adding new formats? Are you looking at bolstering the formats that exist? Where are you all on formats on Arena?
So go ahead, Ian.
We are hard at work on getting to competitive parity in Pioneer. That's one of my biggest, aside from, there's the obvious keep up with standard. So that's always happening with us. In terms of other active format work, it's get people to where they can build their tournament decks in Pioneer and play them on Arena. Practice for tournaments and have those cards there, as well as continuing to expand the non-tournament side of Pioneer, the stuff that's a little bit more janky or brewer focused, or just favorite cards that people have that might not see tournament play. Beyond that, it's continuing to take care of the other formats we already have. It's growing historic. It's keeping up with the have tos, and then doing as much as we can of the additional stuff.
Okay.
Jay's article yesterday, and Jay, if you don't know him, is the design director for Arena, really laid out some of the framing that we put around the formats with is it a tabletop format, or is it a digital format? Is it a rotating format or a non-rotating format? And that's kind of the kind of that set of principles that we use to be like, oh, let's make sure that we have things in these different quadrants to engage the different kinds of players, but we're also always evaluating, right, who's doing what card, what are the needs for the product, right? Adding Explorer last year was very specific, response to hey, this is a need that we have, so let's go ahead and commit to it. We're seeing this year with Brawl growing in historic Brawl growing in popularity, Brawl across the board, but primarily historic Brawl growing in popularity. There's going to be a need there to support that more. But we're really trying to look at what players are doing or what they're interested in, and reinforce those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other bits of big news recently, when we're looking at formats, we would be remiss not to talk about a number of the new exciting releases that Arena has coming up. We talked about a lot of them at Gen Con as part of the 30th anniversary announcement. So there's a bunch of cool stuff coming up. So there's Cons is re-releasing the set, just the full set. You're going to pick up some exciting sets in the future. How are you all looking forward, and what are you all looking most forward to in terms of sets?
I'm personally most excited about Modern Horizons 3. It's a little bit terrifying given the complexity of Modern Horizons sets, but frankly, I have never drafted a Modern Horizons set as much as I wanted to, and I'm very excited to be able to do it from here instead of needing to go into the office.
As like part of your job, you're like, no, I got to test this on.
I got to play more Modern Horizons 3, folks.
Got to look for bugs. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Modern, like, again, I was on Magic Online. Modern Horizons, their formats are great, and being able to, bring that to Arena was pretty important for me and just for kind of where we want to be moving forward, particularly again as a way to help support things like Historic as a again a growing format. Arena's primary non-rotating format. It's again good content for players who love that kind of thing, love powerful Magic. Blake, you're no stranger to powerful Magic, and
no, I'm not.
How awesome it is. So yeah, I think that is something new for us. We're very excited, but we've down. It'll be the third year in a row that our summer, or fourth year in a row that our summer is doing something kind of new and exciting. Right, from Lord of the Rings this year to Baldur's Gate last year. We're continually trying to find things that are new and exciting, and players will enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I've successfully steered the conversation to the most asked question in chat right now. So we're talking about powerful Magic. We're talking about future releases. We know that Cons is coming, and with it, fetch lands. So I'm going to ask two-part question. The first part is, has a decision been made? Are fetch lands going to be pre-banned in Historic? Are they going to be playable in Historic? Is there any thinking in that space yet?
Well, I'm going to say a thing, and then I'll let Ian say a thing. I don't think we're ready to answer that question today.
Okay.
One of the things that we've been talking about as we add more cards and sets to Arena is Historic's really healthy. Historic started as, kind of we need a place for players to play all their cards. Okay, that's how it started.
Yeah.
Where we're at now, though, is that we want Historic to be healthy, engaging, and diverse. And in order to do that, we're going to manage that format a little bit differently than just say all of the cards. You're already seeing that, going all the way back to Strixhaven and some of the pre-bans there.
Yep.
So, I think you can, again, we're not ready to announce today, but I think with that in mind, you can look at things like fetch lands as being very powerful enablers, and are they healthy for the format? We're still talking about it. We have a little bit of time to make that decision. So that's where we're at. It was like, we want Historic to continue to be healthy and diverse. We're going to use that as the lens moving forward for Historic. So yeah, we will pre-ban as needed.
Okay.
Ian?
The only thing I'd add to that is, at the same time, we are aware that there is a growing list of cards that are on Arena that you can collect, that you can play with in like sealed events, and then there is no constructed format for those cards. We know that's there, and it is a thing that we talk about.
Okay, well, that's actually great, because that was one of the other questions I saw that was leading into this. Was someone noted there's a growing list of powerful but beloved cards that are not playable in 60 card formats. Things like Ragavan, Swords to Plowshares, that sort of deal that players do enjoy but don't have a place. But it sounds like you're all thinking on that and trying to come up with a solution.
Yep.
I will also throw out that, for what it's worth, we had that no ban event recently, and as much as everyone constantly tells me Lightning Bolt is fine, Lightning Bolt is really, really, really good. Like I've seen the numbers very recently.
Yes.
On the no ban, that would be a fun article just to see. Here's data from the no ban event.
Yeah. We pay attention. I think some people in the community have mentioned, the no ban event. And it was run with a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than just fun. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, I mean that. Well, let's take that a little bit further, because you all run a lot of fun events, interesting events, that sort of stuff. But that's not the end of it. You all use the data to kind of inform future decisions. Is that right?
Absolutely. And informed is the right word that we try to use. We try to separate data driven versus data informed. Like those are separate things. But yeah, this is definitely, a spot where we wanted to do something really fun, because again, playing powerful Magic is really fun. But we also want to learn from it, and then, all right, how do we use this to make better decisions moving forward? What do people like? What do we see as, what would be a problem if we were going to do something, in this vein, and try and get ahead of that. And then, when we talk about, hey, we have this giant list of powerful Magic cards, some of them are absurdly powerful. Like Channel is an absurdly powerful card.
Yeah.
Right. Like, is there a format that card can be healthy in? Don't know.
Canadian Highlander. I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah.
It's not busted in Canadian Highlander. Almost no one plays it. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. So just bring Canadian Highlander to...
So
I get one of those every show. I get to do my one Canadian Highlander.
yeah.
Okay, so let's move into just straight up Q&A section. I'll just go through questions as they come through, no particular order. Chat, what's helpful to me, if you want me to notice your question a little bit easier as chat goes through, tag it at Magic at the beginning of your question. And as long as it's not an offensive question, I'll ask it. Kiritz and Ian may or may not be able to answer it, but they'll let us know what that is. So one question I have seen pop up a few times that I'm looking at, Bolt Snap Bolt here is asking specifically, but I've seen others ask it, is about 5th copy protection for reprints and the status of that.
Try to take that one, Ian?
Yeah, I believe I will note real quick that it wasn't my team that implemented it, so I believe I understand it, but the status of it is that we now do it by name. Previously, we did 5th copy protection of reprints if they were identical, to make sure that you weren't getting another copy that was exactly the same other than the set symbol. That has shifted to, if the card has the same name and you have 4 of any of them from any set, you could have 2 from Ixalan, 2 from M21, and we go, okay, that's 4. And we treat that as a card that you have 4 copies of. And that means that we compensate you for any 5th copies in limited formats, and in pack opening, we don't put those into your packs until you've collected everything else in the set.
All right.
And that should have went live with WoW, the release last week.
Yep. That went live.
So it's here.
Oh.
It's a thing. We talked a bit about this at Gen Con, but the specific question is 4-player historic brawl when, please. But the general question is multiplayer, and I know you talked about this a bit around the Gen Con announcement.
Yeah. So we know we have a giant gap in what Arena offers when we say you cannot play with 3 or 4 players. We are doing investigations and work towards how would we solve this problem. That is ongoing. We have very passionate folks on the team who, and again, we've talked about this before, hinted about this before. We do, we have a couple things. We do some discretionary time where engineers and designers can work on passion projects. We allocate some amount of time to that. We also have a program that we call Experimental Frenzy, where every few months we dedicate a couple of days to, hey, teams, go self-serve some projects and go explore some spaces. And in both of those scenarios, we have people who are looking actively at, what does 3 or 4 player Magic look like? And then beyond that, we're looking at, my level and Ian's level, more strategic level on, all right, as we get closer to what this looks like, how do we implement it, right? There is a world in which 4-player Magic on your phone is just terrible. So, is that something that we want to do? Like, and if not, then we have to be very deliberate about how we present that and how we allow players to engage. So we still have a lot of questions to answer, but it is definitely on our minds. I think when we talked about at Gen Con, we kind of gave a roadmap, and this was, several. We would expect it to be a few years away to actually having a solution for this on our side, but it is certainly, we have to talk now about stuff that we want to deliver in a couple of years. It's one of the, if you read the article, it's one of the points in my article, which is like, oh, the time is weird because it seems both incredibly far away and also like 2 years. That sounds like infinity away for multiplayer. And then you talk to engineers and it's like, oh, geez, how are we going to do this in 2 years?
Yeah.
So.
So I'll read the question and then I'll preface it a little bit. The question, I've seen this a number of times, is do you guys have the license to rebalance cards from Lords of the Ring on Arena? And I think we've said previously that it's not a license issue. We just have said we don't plan to rebalance Universes Beyond cards. Am I remembering that correctly? That's a philosophical thing?
So we have, I believe we have the ability to rebalance if we choose to. It does require some conversations, but we have that ability. I don't think we've ever said we're not going to rebalance. We also, again, are data informed, so we'll look and see where some issues are and make sure that we're making the right changes for when we have rebalances. But there's nothing preventing us from rebalancing, as far as I know.
All right.
There would be a conversation with the licensor, but that's true of everything you see that involves the licensor in the game. Every sleeve was a conversation. Every banner ad that you see was a conversation. So we have a lot of those conversations.
Yep. I'll throw this question out. It's more of a request than a question, but can we have Spellstutter Sprite on Arena? It's the only main fairy missing. Just add it to your little list.
I'll note it down.
Yeah. Ian is the right person to ask for that.
Noted.
Next question. About the historic banned list, and this might dovetail with something we talked about earlier. Are there any plans to revisit it, since there are cards that were banned 3 years ago and the format is no longer the same?
I would expect us to revisit those lists when we see things have changed. But again, I think the bar to get off the list is going to be pretty high. So, and one of the reasons is just, hey, we've taken this step. We're in a healthy spot. Like, I would expect to see something more along the lines of an experimental event to see if to validate assumptions before we just pull something off the list.
Yeah.
So I would not expect something to just come off the list as a surprise.
Yeah. Well, and that's it's funny that conversation is similar to the tabletop one in that if a format's healthy, yes, it can possibly absorb taking cards off the ban list, but why risk it? Kind of thing, unless it's going to add and make the format better, which Arena has the ability to test that.
It's a good way of thinking about it is we're not just looking for doesn't mess everything up. We're looking for actually makes things better.
Right.
Like the threshold is not doesn't ruin things.
Let's see. Can you consider revamping traditional sealed rewards? It doesn't award play-in points, even though the qualifiers are sealed.
Short answer, yeah. I will.
Okay.
I will take that note.
All right, there we go. Let's see. Oh,
I think sealed. I think sealed is one where it's just it's a temporary format. It doesn't persist all the time. So it just there. I can't think of any reasons why we wouldn't do that if that's your preferred play method.
Ian, you might be able to answer this, but it might be a bigger discussion. Why are some cards that are not that powerful still they use nerfed, adjusted, whatever in historic, like Omnath or Fires of Invention?
The answer is pretty similar to the take it off the ban list question. It's not a question of Omnath doesn't break things if you revert the change. It's does historic get better if you revert the change. That's not to say it's not worth us doing some investigating, but it's something where we'd have to be confident, like, this makes more interesting decks viable and playable rather than, this collapses the meta or puts an irritating or difficult to play against or play with deck into the game.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to think Omnath's a great example because we were just talking about fetch lands earlier. And when you're talking about these things, these decisions can't be made in a vacuum because you could say, yeah, fetch lands are fine to introduce to historic. You could say, yeah, Omnath is fine to put back down, but you put those together and you have a completely different story and you create a deck right there and maybe that deck would be good for the format, maybe it wouldn't, but there's more to consider than them in a vacuum.
Yeah, and we look at, health, and we talked about this. I think we had a format, conversation, last year on Weekly, where we talked a little bit about format diversity and where we like it to be. And when we look at stuff like, when we look at the top played decks, how many decks are in there in like the top 20% of what's played? And Alchemy and Historic are super healthy. There's 15 or 20 decks at any given time that are in the top 20% of the meta, and that's really high. Like tabletop formats tend to be a little bit more condensed. You're maybe 5 or in that space. So anything that would change that would get extra scrutiny for us.
All right. We're gonna go back to duplicate protection because some people in chat are asking for some clarification. It says you're currently not getting gems for 5th copies on reprints or Vault Progress for commons or uncommons.
I'm gonna pass.
I would have to double check. Yeah.
Okay.
I would have to double check the implementation. I know that again, shifting from the name plus effectively art was the previous bar. Now it is just name. But we would have to double check and make sure everything's working correctly. But we could certainly verify.
Okay. For those asking the question, we'll have the comms team follow up on social, probably with or in some form or fashion on that. All right. Next question. So we've had a couple questions about different features people are asking about implementation for. Are there any plans to implement chat in Arena?
We have talked about it a lot. We currently do not have it on a schedule. I believe again at the Gen Con event, or you can go back and check it out on YouTube. We will be exploring social improvements as part of our charter for next year. So, does that mean that chat will make that cut? It depends on if we think we can provide a really good experience for players. But it is certainly part of the conversation around how do we make Arena feel a little bit more social and allow players to connect with their friends better.
Okay. And then the other implementation question I've seen a number of times is on spectator mode, if there are any plans for that.
answer continues to be the same on spectator mode. There are currently no plans for spectator
mode. Any hope for a gladiator queue? For those who don't know, Gladiator is kind of like Arena's version of Canadian Highlander, actually. A singleton format, but with no commander or anything like that. You just kind of battle against each other, historic list. There is a ban list for it. It's mostly community run at this point, but we have run some events in the past. So is there any hope for a queue in the future?
My feeling on will there be queues, like events again in the future? I would be absolutely shocked if the answer wasn't yes. At the same time, and this is something like I've talked to Wheeler, and he's on a similar page talking to other folks in the Gladiator community and on their the format community leaders, that Gladiator being fan and community run is a big part of the identity of that format, and that's not something where we necessarily want to intercede. And I don't think that anybody really wants to be in a world where, you know, the Gladiator community decides a card needs to be banned and they've got a tournament coming up and they reach out to us and we go, I can do that in 2 weeks. We just, the build windows aren't open right now. And the conversation is suddenly, you know, I'm glad that they are limber and can do things at the speed that they want to do them and make the calls that are right for them. And I think that that's a healthy thing for that format.
Back to feature implementation possibilities. There are several questions about friend deck sharing decks with your friends.
that is definitely something that we want. You know, I mentioned the program we have called Experimental Frenzy. One of the ones for the last one of those frenzies we had, which was just a few weeks ago, is a piece of that of a framework that it would allow us to do that in the future. So it is definitely something that we want. You know, it requires some work, but we are, you know, again, slowly making progress towards the ability to do that.
You may or may not be able to answer this, but it's a good question, so we'll ask it. Will future remaster or re-release draft sets be Pioneer focused, like Khans of Tarkir, or are any older sets being considered?
As far out as I have scheduled, I am focused on Pioneer. That does not mean that's the only thing we can ever do, and that we can't decide to do something older or another classic from the past. We've looked at some formats and as in those discretionary times, people have done things like looked at Portal and gone, how close to Portal are we? You know, can we throw that on for fun? And so yeah, that's a thing we talk about, but as far as our schedule is defined right now, we are focused on Pioneer.
Yep. And we have so Cons will be a very interesting experiment. It's the first time we're running just a straight backlist set. Like Arena hasn't done that, so we will learn from that. But we certainly wanted to try that with a fan favorite draft format to see, you know, what that experience is. We've done a handful of remastered. I mentioned in the Gen Con panel that as of now, Shadows over Innistrad was the last remaster that we have planned. We don't currently have plans for another one. That doesn't mean there won't be another one, but that's just not currently in our roadmap for the next couple of years. Pioneer Masters would be one of those things that kind of takes that spot. That will be another really good experiment for us. I think, and I'll just preemptively answer this because I saw it in one of the Reddit threads, and Jay answered it there, but Pioneer Masters will be a draftable format. We're planning on it to live up to the name of, Masters as much as we can. So
as being a killer draft format makes sense.
Correct.
Will the Jurassic Park Universes Beyond cards be coming to Arena when Ixalan comes out?
As
Um,
sad as I am that the first Ian in Magic will not be on Arena, we will not be getting the Jurassic Park card.
Okay.
But again, as we always, we may have some cosmetics or something available to
Mhm.
for fans of Jurassic Park.
Okay. All right. I will read this out, and you. I don't know how you'll answer. Answer how you want, but we're gonna read it out. It's a good question. There is currently a huge problem for constructed ranks. The top ranks are dominated by alchemy players to the point where you can't reach the top ranks playing anything else. Would you consider splitting constructed ranked into different ranks for each format?
So I have opinions, and so these are currently opinions and not any statement of the plans that we have, which is
Okay.
The ranked ladder is a good play experience for some players, but maybe not for everybody. So what I'm looking at is how do we provide the right experience for the different kinds of players?
Mm-hmm.
And getting to number one is a very powerful thing, but rank also share like it's skill plus time. It's a little bit different than a skill based experience. And so,
Mm-hmm.
one of my questions that we talk about, but we don't have solid plans for yet is ranked doing what we want it to do for the players who are participating in it? And the answer is for some of them, absolutely 100%. I think for others who care about skill and that kind of being that number one, it may not be being as effective at that as we would like. So
Mm-hmm.
we talk about it. We don't. Again, we have a lot of things that we're juggling. So if and when we make changes is a little bit of it maybe down the line, but there's certainly opportunity. I don't know that we would split them by format. We haven't talked about it yet. If that
Mm-hmm.
helps shed some light on it, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility to do that.
Yep. All right, next question. Any news on achievements or rewards that are not tied to winning?
So the news there is that our awesome design team is actively doing that. We're in the exploration phase on locking in what we need it to be, what the possible space is, um, what is going to appeal to the most players possible. So
Mm-hmm.
it's actively their next project and is in flight right now, but I do not have any details on what that will ultimately look like. Um, I would expect a lot of the people listening to this are have been past the new player experience, but the way that we rolled that out was we rolled it out in several releases over the course of the first half of the year. I would expect
Mm-hmm.
something similar for achievements, where there might be some releases where there's some moderate progress, and then over time we continue to refine and flesh out that project because we want to get make progress more visibly over time rather than say, hey, we're working on this thing and in 2.5 years it'll be delivered. That's one of our philosophy changes over the last couple of years is, hey, let's
Mm-hmm.
deliver value when we have something that's valuable, even if it's not 100% of everything we want.
No.
A valuable thing to keep in mind with the time it's taking to design and implement achievements is that as a game that's almost entirely PvP, it's really important to design achievements that don't lead to weird, aberrant, or degenerate behavior on the player's part. If you have
Yeah.
an achievement for lose 1,000 matches or something, you've just put a bunch of really weird behavior into the queue. There's a lot of things you want to try to avoid,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I'm gonna bundle a bunch of questions that I've seen together, and you can all talk about it. It's all kind of under the umbrella of rebalancing. So I've seen a number of questions about rebalancing for alchemy? What's our frequency? Have we considered doing more rebalanced limited events? They said similar to the Baldur's Gate changes. I think we did it for SNC as well. So why don't you start by talking about how you all think about rebalancing now, because I know that has shifted, and then what sort of rebalancing looks like going forward for the various formats that have it.
Well, I'll start and then I'll let Ian finish because this is more his wheelhouse, which is rebalancing and delivering card sets uses the same basic set of people in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of that how it started, how it's going. We had we'll say high optimism that we'd be able to rebalance more frequently than we've been able to right now. It is still something that we would like to get to have a more regular, a better, faster cadence of rebalancing. But right now it's challenging with the amount of other content that we have.
Mm-hmm.
From a philosophical perspective or anything else. I mean, I'll let Ian speak to that a little bit, but that's kind of where we're at. Is yes, we want to balance more. We need to find ways to do it better, but with the systems that we have right now, it is a part of the card set flow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. The other part of it is just making sure that we understand the data and have enough of it to make informed choices. There are definitely times, not just in alchemy, throughout the whole history of Magic, that everyone is convinced that deck A is utterly broken and cannot be beaten, and it's going to dominate the format for the next year. And if you wait 4 weeks, oh, actually, you know what? We all figured out the weakness of this deck, and it's no longer a big deal. It's completely fallen off the ladder. And it's, even though we can move quickly, it's not always the right move.
All right. Let's see. Here's just a bit of feedback. Please consider removing the kill X creatures or attack X times quest. No reason, but just.
Sounds like a control player.
I mean, I struggle with I'm not gonna lie, I struggle with those. That's the first rebalance. I'm like, click to swap, attack with creatures. This is gonna take forever.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, I'm a huge fan of that one. That's easy.
I've seen a few questions in this space. Is there any thought of further, more robust, different support for Brawl, either regular Brawl, historic Brawl? So I've seen this question a couple ways, as anthology releases, as pre-constructed decks. How do you all think about Brawl support?
I mean, go ahead, Ian. You start.
I was just gonna say, sorry. It would be so nice to be in a studio and not remote. Chris already said earlier, that Brawl has really jumped up in popularity in the last year, and that level of play merits attention, and it merits focused work. So the short answer is, yeah, probably.
Yeah. The thing I will call out, and again, it was in Jay's article a little bit yesterday, which is we are still, we'll say, cautious around really promoting Brawl as a hyper competitive format.
Mm-hmm.
In general, I think any of the formats that have had a commander, we're going to be a little bit cautious with how heavily we lean into competitive, because it seems more so than some of the other formats. There's just a wide range of motivations, and while winning is always fun and important for those formats, it tends to be not necessarily the number one motivator. So we want to be cautious in that space. We do know that there are certainly competitive people, like the competitive Commander crowd does exist.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're already getting a little bit of that in the fact of that we're currently stuck with one player versus one player. So we just want to be cautious in that space, and over incentivizing, winning is probably more damaging to the format. So I wouldn't. So that's a long-winded way of saying I wouldn't necessarily expect full tournament support or uh, full ranked support specifically.
All right. This next question is probably a question for Ian. What are your honest thoughts on the Explorer metagame right now?
The Explorer metagame right now, I mean, my honest thoughts are that it's missing cards. Like we are aware there are decks that are complete that are doing really well, and there are decks that are missing cards that they need, and that is hurting it right now. We are genuinely working as fast as we can to get that stuff in. We've got KTK work happening as I'm talking. There are people working on KTK, which brings some really important cards that flesh out some deck archetypes. And yeah, it's I am aware, and we've added as much as we can.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to. We'll use this as an opportunity since we're sharing information, which is when we look at formats. There's a lot of talk about how many cards away from a format are we. The number of cards almost isn't terribly relevant. It's how many mechanics, how many unique
Mm-hmm.
cards, right, that do things that other cards don't do. And that's where, again, when we look at what we've delivered in certain anthologies, or you know in which sets we choose to work on, some of that is in service to, all right, where do we get the biggest bang for our buck in mechanics? Because that is more important than specific, like the raw count of cards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just wanted to call that out again. We understand that sometimes we're not moving as quickly uh, as folks like, but in you know the realities are that some of the mechanics are complicated and do things that we haven't done on Arena, and those are going to take a bigger
Mm-hmm.
time investment. So we have to have the right window in which to do that. So when we look at, hey, what are we doing for an anthologies, or what are we doing for an alchemy drop? Those things are built specifically with the bandwidth we have available in the window we have to build them to deliver the best possible thing in that space. And so that's where we're going to see a little bit of push and pull with what we deliver versus what ultimately the community might want.
Speaking of so chat's playing off that a little bit, and I got two questions that are in that space back to back. So asking about how hard it has been to implement um, morph and delve as two of the upcoming mechanics.
Delve is fairly straightforward. There's work for it, but it's not an exceptionally complicated mechanic. There are some edge cases around cards that like exile something as they enter the battlefield. You have to make sure that those cards that they care about don't count delve cards that got exiled from your graveyard. That's an easy place for issues to show up. You have to write protection around. Morph is one of those things that the basic case of it is very straightforward, and then you have to capture stuff like that Planeswalker deck Tezzeret that came out 6 years ago that puts cards onto the battlefield face down, can technically put a morph card onto the battlefield face down, and it's a 4/4 because Tezzeret did it, but the morph ability still works to turn it face up. And it's all that stuff that makes morph take longer. Or, the art that we have for a morph card has no room for a text box. So if a morph card gains abilities, we have to make a custom card display that can
Mm-hmm.
show a morph card, but has a text box for the abilities that it's gained. So nothing that's like, oh god, how do we do this? It's all just like, yep, that's a really long list of little things you got to make sure work correctly.
Right.
Yep.
Knowing this from working on Medic Line, Morph plus Mutate is super fun.
When you're pile of cards, you just flip one right in the middle.
Similar question. Does hidden strings keep you up at night?
I say this knowing the people responsible for it. Layer 3 was a mistake. Yeah, I'm not stoked about hidden strings. Doing layer 3 stuff is not. Or wait, no, sorry, that's a different cipher card. Hidden strings does not keep me up at night. No. Hidden strings, we haven't done cipher yet, but cipher doesn't scare me. It's just work.
Yeah.
There's different kinds of work. Some of the work is just very like, what are we going to do? How do you solve this problem? And some work is picking up a bag of rice and carrying it and doing that 200 more times. Just work. But we know how to do it. We just need time.
Yeah. And then the other part of the work that exists, again, that might not be captured in it's just, this card, is how are we presenting information to players in the duel scene? What are the associated VFX and what do those look like? And that's all, again, just work that has to be accounted for as part of Cipher is a new, unique mechanic that doesn't have any of those components to draw off of yet. So what is its visual language, and how are we going to make sure that it's the right thing for future versions of Cipher cards that we build, or other future mechanics that may be in a similar space and or already exist that are in a similar space. So it's not always just getting the rule to work.
We are nearing the end of the stream, so this is a good time for a retrospective question, and it's a good one. Are there features or aspects of Arena that currently exist in the game that you didn't expect 5 years ago? Or also, what things are you most happy or proud of to have implemented?
I am most proud of Jumpstart. Jumpstart, among pretty much everything on Arena, is something that we were not planning to do, that I saw and went, no, I really think we can make this work. I think we can find capacity on the team to get this in. I think we can add this format. Given that meant Jumpstart hit during the pandemic, that meant Arena was a place to play Jumpstart, which made me really happy because I love Jumpstart and I love that people actually got to experience it. I think that the Jumpstart card pool did a ton to shape the early identity of Historic. It really did a lot to make Historic not just standard plus a few sets. I look back on getting jump started and I feel really good about the work that we did there and championing that.
All right. Kiritz?
So for me, I think, kind of surprised, and then, also we'll call it proud, is getting to golden packs is a thing that I wouldn't have expected, at the beginning of last year before we did our economy stream. And then we did this stream and we did some other stuff and listened to player feedback and really honed in on, again, where some of that pain was for the players that we just weren't appealing to in, how Arena's economy was structured. And I think golden packs have done a really good job of bridging that gap in a way that makes everybody happy, as far as, I'm not a draft player, I can't collect cards that way, or don't want to collect cards that way. And having that path to build out collections, I think, has been very successful and kind of a perfect win-win for how we want to run the business and account for evolving what we're doing to better meet players where they're at.
Great. Another feature implementation question. Would it be possible to get a draft mode where we can directly invite each of the seats? I'd love to be able to draft with friends.
I will tell you that we have talked about what that would look like. So it is certainly an area of opportunity, particularly when we talk about social play. being able to do a draft with your friends is very social play that we are currently missing.
I'm gonna summarize a bunch of questions because they were all sort of different, but all on the same topic on premier level play that qualifies you for higher levels, that sort of thing. And I guess I'll just sort of generally ask: are you all happy with the structure that Arena has currently? Are you looking to make any changes? What are your thoughts on the current setup for high level qualifying play on Arena?
I think it is a good start. I do not think we have gotten to our end state yet. And in fact, I know that I was talking with William Jensen a few days ago, Billy Jensen a few days ago or last week about this. And he and I are of similar minds, and there's opportunity in what we're doing. It's a matter of figuring out what it is that we want to adjust and when and how. So again, I think we have a good foundation. Learning from McGo is one of those things that I've done as I've come over from McGo to Arena is like, what works here, what doesn't, what do we need to adjust? And I think the Arena Championship system is a good start. I think the hooks into the Pro Tour are a good start. I think that there is a ton of opportunity to continue to refine and get better.
Ian, any other thoughts on that?
And I'm mostly responsible for making sure the cards work correctly. So as long as that's the case, I'm happy. I'm glad that people have the opportunity to get involved in competitive Magic from home. I know for a lot of people, in addition to a convenience thing, it's an accessibility thing. There are people for whom this is like physically or for health reasons, this is how they can do competitive Magic and how they can be involved in premier level play. And it makes me really proud to be a part of that.
Yep. And again, I think we saw some of that. I was at Minneapolis where we saw some of that, where the finals was, Reed versus somebody from Arena. So again, I think there's a really cool opportunity again, coming back from Magic Online and being around when Reed was getting his start or when Brad Nelson was getting his start because he's qualifying for the Pro Tour through Magic Online. I think again, digital is a very real path to help people get their foot in the door that just may not exist when they don't have a really competitive scene near them. So I think it's very important.
Yep. All right. We are just about out of time. There are still a ton of great questions in chat, so I apologize to everyone who we have not gotten to your question. We just did like 50 minutes of questions, and they were all great questions and really good discussion. So, Kiritz, Ian, I appreciate your time. I'm sure chat, they've said it. I appreciate you answering questions. Before we go, we just have like two-ish minutes left. Last thoughts on 5th anniversary. This is a big deal for you all. Any last thoughts on the 5th anniversary? We'll start with you, Kiritz.
Yeah, so I have a couple things. So first, as far as communicate, we've spent a lot of time this year really evaluating how we talk to players and fans. We've seen that with Dev Diaries and some of the other stuff. I'm proud of the progress we've made. We have a lot more to go, so expect us to continue to find ways to be more proactive in conversations so we continue to answer questions. And then the other thing I'm just going to say, and I said it at the end of the article today, which is 5 years is amazing, but we are in this for the long haul. None of it is possible without the people who are tuning in and playing. Like, it just isn't possible. So undying gratitude and thanks to everybody who, the millions of players that we see that get to, join us and have fun playing the greatest game in the world. So it's cannot stress enough how much that means to me and us.
Yeah. Ian?
I've worked in video games for about 20 years now, and it is such a rare and lucky thing to get to be part of something that lasts this long, that you get to have an audience like this that is so passionate and committed, and a team that is ready to stick it out and be there for the long haul. I work with, by and large, the same people I worked with 4 years ago when I started. There are some additional folks there, and there are some people who have moved on, but by and large, it's the same people, which is so rare and special to have in this line of work. And it's possible because we have amazing players and a phenomenal game, and it's really cool to get to do.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Next week, we're going to actually stream twice. It'll be the same show. It's pre-recorded, talking about the Extra Life charity work that Wizards of the Coast is doing and the different ways that we are fundraising through Extra Life. That the stream will be at this time as normal on the 19th, but we'll also stream on Monday morning as well. So look for that. The Monday and Tuesday streams will be the same, but a lot of cool stuff there about the work that Wizards of the Coast is doing for Extra Life. In the meantime, check out Wilds of Eldraine on Magic the Gathering Arena or at your local game store, and we will see you next week.